So I figured that everybody would be interested in hearing a shiur about Sefiras HaOmer. We are in the midst of this unique mitzvah of Sefiras HaOmer. So we will discuss some yesodis, some ideas about Sefiras HaOmer. And if time allows, I don't know how much time we have, then maybe we will touch upon some halacha l'maisa dilemmas as well. So Sefiras HaOmer l'chayra is one of the many mitzvos shebedibur. We know that the Tariag mitzvahs could be broken down in many ways. And one of them, as the Mekabolim wrote many years ago, but it's not really Kabbalah, it's halacha, it's Hatorah. The Tariag mitzvahs are divided into mitzvahs shebedibur, machshava, and maisa. Many mitzvahs are about your thoughts, which is Avos Hashem, Yiras Hashem, Emunas HaYichud, and many mitzvahs that are about your thoughts and your feelings. Most of the mitzvahs are about your actions and your deeds. Mitzvahs shebemaisa. Many mitzvahs, many of them in the Torah, many midrabanan, are mitzvahs shebedibur, which would be min Torah Kriya Shema, Berachas Torah, Tefillah, and Mea Brachas B'Kol Yom, and then we have Mikra Megillah, and Mikra Bikurim, and Vidui Maisas. A great part of mitzvahs Torah are mitzvahs shebedibur. Many of them in the Torah, many midrabanan. The Bnei Yisachar, who was an amazing phenomenon, a phenomenal gadol, a Hasidic master, and he wrote many svarim, Chasidus and Kabbalah and Drush and Halacha. And one of his unique svarim is called Derech Pikudecho. And the Derech Pikudecho is just to explain Chelkei, Machshava, Dibur, and Maisa in each and every one of the mitzvahs. And he argues that every mitzvah has a chelak of Machshava, Dibur, and Maisa. We only have Nun Ches, 58 mitzvahs, and nobody knows, did he write on the entire spectrum of Tariag? But it was never published, or maybe he didn't get further than 58 mitzvahs. It is an interesting phenomenon, maybe coincidence. Does it have significance or not? How would we know? Olo Besaro Hashemayim, he passed away when he was 58 years old. Does that have anything to say? How would we know? Maybe yes, maybe no. So Sefiras HaOmer is one of the mitzvahs shebedibur. But surprisingly, in all the fundamental halachas, it's contrary to all the other mitzvahs shebedibur. And today we will discuss Shnayim Shehem Arba, two fundamental concepts which are four different halachas. And in each and every one of these four halachas, mitzvahs shebedibur is different, Sefiras HaOmer is different than all the other mitzvahs shebedibur. Starting off with kavanah, mitzvahs tzrichas kavanah. And the halachas of mitzvahs tzrichas kavanah we find in many sugyas and shas. Brachas Yud Aleph, Brachas Yud Gimel, dealing with Berachas Sanahanan and Kriyas Shema. Psochim Kuf Yud Aleph, dealing with mitzvahs achilas maror. Rosh Hashanah Chov Ches, dealing with achilas matzah and with tkiyas shofar, hatokeya l'shiur. In Shulchan it's gepasken, Siman Samach Siv Daled. Yesh oimrim shemitzvahs tzrichas kavanah, v'yesh oimrim shemitzvahs ein tzrichas kavanah, v'yesh oimrim mitzvahs tzrichas kavanah, v'chein halacha. So out of all the various sugyas, the sugya in mitzvahs tzrichas kavanah is in Hilchas Kriyas Shema. And if the Mechaber writes yesh oimrim shemitzvahs ein tzrichas kavanah, v'yesh oimrim shetzrichas kavanah v'chein halacha, that is halacha. What are the fundamental concepts and principles in the Lashon of the Shulchan Aruch is? When the Shulchan Aruch brings two opinions, if it is stam v'yesh oimrim, halacha k'shita rishono. If it is yesh oimrim v'yesh oimrim, halacha k'shita basroi. So here the Shulchan Aruch writes, yesh oimrim shemitzvahs ein tzrichas kavanah, v'yesh oimrim shemitzvahs tzrichas kavanah, that already would be enough to understand that the halacha is mitzvahs, sichos, kavana. But the Mechaber goes beyond that, and he writes, Yesh oimrim shemitzvahs, sichos, kavana, v'chein halacha. So all the Achronim struggle with Hilchas Sefiras HaOmer, Tov Pei Tes Siv Daled. Misha shoya lo yisechavero kami yomim hayoim besvira, lo yoimar hayoim kach v'kach. Because if he answers to another, today is kach v'kach, echad v'shloishim yoim lo oimar, then he can no longer count with a bracha. So he should respond to the person asking him, Esmoil hayu kach. And all the Achronim ask, but Mr. Sichos Kavona. And when he answered to another, this is today's number, it is clear as daylight that he has no intention to be Yotze the mitzvah. He wants to say a bracha, which he didn't say. He probably wants to say the L'Shem Yichud that Chasidim say before Sefiras HaOmer, which he didn't say. So it's clear that he had no intention, no kavanah to be Yotze. So why can't he say the bracha? So the Pri Megadim says, mitzvah sichos kavanah is a suffix, and therefore we are machmer on both tzadim. So in Simon Samach the Shulchan Aruch says, if you said Kriya Shema without kavanah, you need to say it again, because we're choishish mitzvah sichos kavanah. However, if you count the Sefira without kavanah, you can't count again with a bracha, because we also are choishish mitzvahs ein sichos kavanah. And the Biur justly rejects the Pri Megadim, because in Simon Samach it is clear that mitzvah sichos kavanah is not a suffix. If the Shulchan Aruch writes yesh oimrim she'ein tzorech v'yesh oimrim she'tzorech v'chein halacha, that's a psak, and it's not a suffix. Birakro, Semen Tov Peites, when the Shulchan Aruch says, Im oimer lachaveiroi hayom kach v'kach yomim la'oimer einoi yochel lachzor v'lispor bebrocha, the Gaon writes 3 words, Lamanda Omar mitzvahs ein sichos kavanah. What does the Gaon mean? Many assume that the Gaon is the same as the Pri Megadim. We are machmir, and it's a suffix whether mitzvah sichos kavanah or not. My understanding is the halacha is clearly mitzvah sichos kavanah, but the Mechaber says, when your friend asks you, "Kama yomim hayom esvira," why get into confusion? Why get into any svak at all? Why can't you just say, "Esmoil hayu kach v'kach"? Because if you say hayom kach v'kach, according to the Shita, mitzvahs ein sichos kavanah, you count with a bracha. Ein halachic Shita zu. So in my understanding of the Gaon, if you did tell another hayom kach v'kach yomim la'omer, you count again with a bracha. All the Shulchan Aruch means to say, according to the Biur, lechatchila, why? Why answer in a way which, according to the Shita, mitzvah ein sichos kavanah, you can't say a bracha? Why can't you simply just say esmal hayu kach v'kach? And that's a chiddush, because in my understanding of the Gaon, if he did say hayom kach v'kach yomim la'omer, and he would ask a question, we would say count with a bracha, because mitzvah sichos kavanah. Choik Yankov, and Choik Yankov is one of the greatest achronim. The Choik Yankov is the Shvus Yankov, the Minchas Yankov and Isavehete, the Shvus Yankov Shalas Shuvas, Choik Yankov and Hilchas Pesach. And one of the amazing Sforim of the Shvus Yankov, Rabbi Yankov Reisher, who lived more than 300 years ago, he has a sefer on the Ein Yankov. Is everybody familiar with the Ein Yankov? Do you know the sefer? So once, in shuls in Europe, not every shul had a shas, but every shul had 4 or 5 Ein Yankovs. And people used to come between Mincha and Mara. They used to learn Agadatis. Ein Yankov is a compilation of all the Agadatis in Shas. We are a Darav Lamdonim. Recently, I wanted to check the Ion Yankov, which is the Shvus Yankov and Ein Yankov, and I asked the Gabba of my shul being an Ein Yankov. He said, I went through all the shuls in Ramat Gimel where I live, and nobody has the Ein Yankov. I told them, go to the store and buy an Ein Yankov. So the Shus Yankov has a perish on the Agadah that's an Ein Yankov. Why did a Gadol Ador, one of the greatest Gedolim, write a special perish on the Ein Yankov? He tells the story in his Haggadah. He had an eye disease, and the doctor said he was going blind. And they suggested a treatment that might help. And he said that is when he decided to write a perish on the Ein Yankov, symbolic. Ein Yankov, HaKadosh Baruch Hu should send them a refuah shlema for his disease and his vision. And Baruch Hashem, he wrote that perish, and he had a refuah shlema, and that's how we got the Ein Yankov on Ein Yankov. So anyway, Choik Yankov writes, Sefiras HaOmer is an exception. Einoi elo sfira ba'alma. Regarding all the other mitzvahs, sichas gavona, Sefiras HaOmer is different. Einoi elo sfira ba'alma. What does that mean? And why wouldn't we say Hatokeya l'shir lo yotzo, mitzvah sichas gavona, but Kiyah Shofar is only Kiyah ba'alma. And Achilas Matzah is only Achila ba'alma. So what does the Choik Yankov mean? Why is Sefiras HaOmer different than all the other mitzvahs shebedibur? And all the other mitzvahs shebedibur, mitzvah sichas kavona, Sefiras HaOmer is different. Why? Hatzad hasheni shel oisei hamadbeya is havona. Do you need to understand what you're saying? The Mogan Avram writes, Sif Kotten Beisim and Tov Beites. If you say Sefiras and you don't understand the language, Loi Yotzu Yadecha Vosai. Rabbi Yankov Emden, in his Sefer on Shulchan Aruch Orachaim, Moir Oktzio, disagrees with the Mogan Avram, and he quotes a very famous Toises in Sot Lamed Beis. Sot Lamed Beis Toisves says that in any other language, if you're Mekayim a mitzvah without understanding what you're saying, you're not Yotze, except Lashon HaKodesh. And Lashon HaKodesh, even though you do not understand, you're Yotze. Because Lashon HaKodesh is Etzem. All the other languages are just a means of communication, how to convey a message. But Odom HaRishon named all the creatures of the world. Lashon HaKodesh, the letters of Lashon HaKodesh have Kedusha, and that is Etzem. So that is the pnimius of Toisus. But all the poskim quote Toisus. When you say any mitzvah shebedibur on Lashon HaKodesh, even though you don't understand the language, you're Yotze, why would Sefiras HaOmer be different? And Rabbi Yankov Emden disagrees with the Mogan Avram. So in all the other mitzvahs, kavona is a necessity besides Sefiras HaOmer. In all the other mitzvahs, havona is not necessary besides Sefiras HaOmer, lahokal or lahachmir. Why? And now two other halachas that are not about your mind, your machshava, your understanding, but rather the methodology. How are we mekayim this mitzvah? Sukkah Lamed Ches is the source, an entire shas. Menayin shehashomeya ka'oina bekol mokoim. All the other mitzvahs shebedibur, one could be mekayim with shmiyah. And if you listen to another, and there is kavanas shemeya v'kavanas mashmiyah, you're Yotze. However, the Mogan Avram is mesupik, berei simin tov peites, whether shmiyah would be sufficient by Sefiras HaOmer, because maybe it would not be considered shetehei svira lechol echod ve'echod. And a menuchas samech hayomid beis, the Gemara dashens, usfartem lechem shetehei svira lechol echod ve'echod. And the Mogan Avram doubts, would shemeya ka'ina be considered svira lechol echod ve'echod? Toisus explains, what's the revusa shetei svira lechol echod ve'echod? Havi amina, that the mitzvah of Sefiras HaOmer is not upon the individual. It's upon Beis Din, like Sefiras Shnois HaShmitin v'Hayovel. So in Parshas Emor, we learned last week the mitzvah of Sefiras HaOmer. In this week's Parsha, Parshas Bahar, we have a mitzvah of Sefiras Shnois HaShmitin v'Hayovel. There would be a Havamina Just like Sefiras Shmit Vayover is upon the Beis Din, not upon every individual, the same would apply to Sefiras HaOmer. Kamash Malan? No, Sefiras HaOmer is different. The mitzvah of Sefiras HaOmer rests upon Kol Echad Ve'echad, upon the individual. And nevertheless, the Magen Avraham is Mesupik. Maybe Shomea Ka'inu would not be considered Svira L'Kol Echad Ve'echad. So once again, this goes against all the other mitzvahs Shebediva. Tshuvas Rebbe Kiva Eiger, Simen Chof Tes up to Lamed Beis. Rebbe Kiva Eiger has a lengthy discussion with his uncle, who was a Gadol B'Yisrael, whether a person could be Yoitze, mitzvah Sefiras HaOmer B'Ksiva. Would we say Ksiva Kedibur? And the Aruch HaShulchan wonders, how could one even have such a ridiculous havamina that you could be Makayim and mitzvah B'Ksiva? Did anybody ever think you could be Makayim mitzvahs Kriyas Shema B'Ksiva, or Birchas HaMazon, or Birchas HaNehanim? Nobody ever thought that you could be Makayim any mitzvah Shebediva B'Ksiva. If one could be Makayim Kriyas Shema B'Ksiva, that would be a marvelous eitzah for all the Sefiras Stam. You could save time. Chaparan another mezuzah. Instead of saying Kriyas Shema Shachar Shel Arvis, you could write another mezuzah. And so the Aruch HaShulchan says, Ma pitom? Why does the Kiva Eiger have a havamina that you could be Yoitze any mitzvah Shebediva B'Ksiva? So by the Kiva Eiger, it's only a havamina. But the Kaf HaChaim brings several achronim that actually paskin you could be Yoitze B'Ksiva. And what's most amazing and shocking to me, Tshuvas Ksav Sofer, Yordei Semakuv Daled. The Ksav Sofer quotes his great father, the Chasam Sofer, on the Gillion of his personal Tshuvas Rebbe Kiva Eiger. The Chasam Sofer wrote on the Gillion in Simachov Tes that just like there is an issur to count Bnei Yisrael B'Ksiva, and it doesn't matter how you count, whether it's by verbalizing the number of Yidden or by writing them down, the same would apply to Sefiras HaOmer. So it's not in Tshuvas Chasam Sofer. I don't know whether it's a psak, but the Ksav Sofer is matik. What the Chasam Sofer wrote on his personal Tshuvas Rebbe Kiva Eiger, and he's noted, yes, you could be Yoitze with Ksiva, just like the Isser of Sefiras B'nai Yisrael. So why is Sefiras HaOmer always the opposite? And all the other mitzvahs Shebediva, mitzvah Sichas Kavana, according to the Chok Yankov, Sefiras HaOmer is different. All the other mitzvahs Havana is not Ma'akev, Sefiras HaOmer is different. And all the other mitzvahs Shebediva Shomea Koina, besides Sefiras HaOmer. In no other mitzvahs Ksiva Kedibur, besides Sefiras HaOmer. Just a side comment. There is no such concept as Ksiva Kedibur. It sounds so natural, but there is no such a thing. We have Hirur Kedibur, and that's a big machlokes in the Poskim. Is the halachic Ravina the Hirur Kedibur or not? Because the Shulchan Aruch says in Siman Samech Beis, when you can't vocalize, then Yahar Her Beliboy. And that is twice in Shulchan Aruch Chaim Samech Beis and Tzadik Daled. Tzadik Daled, the Mishnah Berurah brings both opinions. However, there is no such a thing as Ksiva Kedibur. We found Shomea Koina and Hirur Kedibur. Ksiva in the Rishonim is discussed only by Eidus, and Eidus is not a mitzvah. Eidus is testimony. Eidus is a din. But there is no such a concept as Ksiva Kedibur in any other sugya. And Ksiva Kedibur was born by Sefiras HaOmer and by Shuas Ben Adorim in Shuvas Yankov. So let me share with you my mahalach and my machshava about Sefiras HaOmer. Yes, Sefiras HaOmer is different than all the other mitzvahs Shebediva. Because all the other mitzvahs Shebediva are be'etzem avodas hukeil. whether it's shvuchay shel makom or bekoshes tzrochav or hoidoya, whether it's halal, whether it's birchas hashevach or birchas hatfilo, whether it's kabbalas al malchus shamayim or sfira, lekisha atzmo is not avodas ukeil. There are 4 mitzvahs which involve sfira. One is our Shiur, Sefiras HaOmer. 2, I mentioned it just 5 minutes ago, this week's parsha, Shnoisa Shmitten Vayovel. What are the other 2 mitzvahs that involve Sfira? Shiva Nekiyim, the Zava, and Masa Behema. Vasiri Kodesh. You need to count 9 and be Mekadesh the 10th, which is a korban. And just like everyone understands regarding number 2, 3, and 4, it's not about the Sfira. The Sfira is just about the result. A Zava needs to count Shiva Nekiyim, and that's part of the process of Taharas Azava. You need to count 9 behemoths to be Mekadesh number 10. Beis Din needs to count Shnois HaShmitten Vayovel because Beis Din needs to be Mekadesh Yovel. So it goes without saying the same regarding Sefiras HaOmer. We only need to count something that needs to be counted. And counting is always a means to an end. And it is never an end to itself. Because counting is not avodas ukeil l'kisha'atzmoi. And that is why it is different than any other mitzvah shebedibu. Number 5 is not a mitzvah to say, but a isser. And that is the isser to count b'nei Yisrael. That some sofer is medamet to Sefiras HaOmer. So the Cheskuni. The Cheskuni was a Rishon. We don't know anything about the halachas of the Cheskuni. He has no Sforim al Shas, no Piskei Halacha. But the Cheskuni writes, Sefiras HaOmer is a mitzvah we found twice in Toras Moshe, Parshas Emor, Usfartem Lachem Machras HaShabbos, Parshas Re'ei, Sheva Shavuos Tisper Lacho, Mahochel Chamesh Bakomo. The Cheskuni writes, these 2 mitzvahs are different. Usfartem Lachem Chazal Darshan HaMenochas Shetesvira Lekol Echad V'Yechad. In Parshas Re'ei, the Posek talks Baruch in Yochid. Sheva Shavuos Tisper Lacho, and that is a mitzvah al ha-Beis Din. And he writes, Beis Din has a separate mitzvah on Sefiras HaOmer, like Sefiras Shnois HaShmitten Vayovel. The Posek Asfarat Lachem says, besides the mitzvah shal Beis Din, there is a mitzvah called Yochid v'Yochid. And this is a chiddush we find nowhere else. All the Rishonim Meforshe Shashem Mepiyam Onuchayim, the Ramban, the Rashba, the Ritva, the Ran, and the Rosh, the Rambam, the Ravid, nobody says this besides the Cheskuni. And therefore, well, if anybody's looking for a new chumrah, no one thought about, well, maybe the Beis Din. And when the Beis Din counts, do they need to count twice? Or they could be yotze with 1 svira, the mitzvah shala Beis Din v'shala Yochid. If Sheva Shavuos Tisper Lacho is on the Beis Din, do they have a mitzvah of Sefiras HaYomim as well? Or maybe the Beis Din only needs to count Shavuos. How would we know? Because the Cheskuni is not a posek and nobody quotes it. But Lachoyre it's a mefurish Safri. And the Safri in Parshas Re'ei state, Sheva Shavuos Tisper Lacho beBeis Din Menayin Lekol Echad ve'Echad Talmid Loima Usfartem Lachem Shetesvira Lekol Echad ve'Echad. If it's a Safri, why isn't it in the Rambam? Why doesn't everybody quote the Safri? The Safri is more important than the Tosefta. The Safri comes right after the Mishnah. The Goen, and the Goen was the only Achroin that wrote Tikkunim and Hagoes and Kol Torah Shebal Peh. He skipped nothing. Shesha Sidra Mishnah, Bavli, Yerushalmi, Sefru, Sefri. Mechilta. The Gaon even wrote Hagos on Seder Olam Rabosi. Do you know what that sefer is? Who was the first Jewish historian? Who was the first Jewish historian? In later years, the historians were all maskilim. Gretz and Dubnov, they all were maskilim. But the real first Jewish historian is the Heilige Tana Rabbi Yossi ben Chalafta. And he is quoted twice in Shas, Nidem Mevov and Yavo Messiah Beis. Chazal bring in the Gemara Seder Olam. Rabbi Yossi ben Chalafta writes from the first day of Brias Olam till Tkufas Atanoim. And the Gaon has Tikkunim and Agos on Seder Olam as well. In the Sifri, the Gaon adds one word, but that word is a game changer. Sheva Shavuos Tisbalacho. Yochel bebezdin, menayin lekol echad v'echad talmid leimer usvartem luchem. Yochel bebezdin. No. There's no mitzvah on the bezdin. So just a few weeks ago, we said Yochel merash chodesh. Talmid leimer ba'avazeh v'shoshesh matzav amora menochem lefanach. So the Gaon changes the story. And the Gaon writes one word, Yochel bebezdin talmid leimer usvartem luchem. But the HaOmer, that Sefiras HaOmer rests on the bezdin, isn't it a strange HaOmer? How do we know that Kriyas Shema is on the individual? Maybe it's on the bezdin. How do we know that Berchas HaTorah is on the individual and all the other mitzvahs shebediva? All the mitzvahs that are Avedas Okel rest on each and every yid. All the mitzvahs she'ala bezdin are only responsibility that rests on the basis that things should get done. There is no mitzvah shebegavra, no mitzvah shel-avodas okel that's on bezdin. Avodas okel, each and every yid, that's why we're here, that's why HaKadosh Baruch Hu chose us. Every yid needs to be a oved Hashem. So all the other mitzvahs shebedeva, there's no havim and it rests on the bezdin. But Sefiras HaOmer essentially is no different than Shnoisa Shmitten V'yovel, than Masa Behemoth, than Sefiras Hazava. It is all about the result. And that explains all the four halachas, why Sefiras HaOmer is different than all the other mitzvahs shebediva. Klal Godel Biyodi. And I wrote about this at great length in Minchas Osher, Klole HaMitzvahs. The concept, the halacha mitzvah sichas kavona, is only about mitzvahs shem avoda sukel. If a mitzvah is about the teitzor, there is no din mitzvah sichas kavona. How do I know? Not only misvora, even though it would be clear to me without any raya. Mepashtas asvora. But all the sugyas in Shas dealing with mitzvah sichas kavona, I quoted them before. Brochus, Kriyas Shema, Matzah, Moroel, Shofar. That's it. That's the entire list. 5 mitzvahs. All of them are avodas ukel. But I also have a Beferish Araya from Avodah Zorach of Zion. Machlokes Tanoim, whether a kuti is kosher lemilo. I think it's Rameir and Chachamim. And one says, kuti posalamila, because he has malashem hargerizim. He has in mind avodah zorah. And then the Gemara asks, v'heichan matzinu mila lishma. There's no din lishma b'mila. So what do we care that he's malashem hargerizim? It's a mila kshero. What about Mrs. Sichas Kavana? If he bears in mind l'shem hargerizim, then mitzvah sichas kavana. By Mila, there is no din of mitzvah sichas kavana. Let me make this clear. Mila, the Medrash says in Parshas Lech Lecho, kekoyin godla makav kor magab mizbeach. But that is l'shem shemayim. That is lasas nachas ruach. That's avodas okel. The concept of mitzvah sichas kavana is just the awareness. Mitzvah sichas kavana is ma'akev. By Mila, there is no din of mitzvah sichas kavana, because Mila is about the result, like the Beis Halevi writes in Siman Mem Zayin. And that is why Sefiras HaOmer is Sefira Ba'alma. That's the kavona of the Choik Yankiv. Sefira Ba'alma. And therefore, yes, Sefiras HaOmer is an exception. In all the other mitzvot shebediver, kavona ma'keves, besides Sefiras HaOmer. And that is the reason why Havona is ma'akev. Because if Sefiras HaOmer is all about the result, and you're just saying words, and you don't know what you're saying, then you didn't count. You said, you recited, but you didn't count. So the Pshilei Diskin comes to explain the Mogen Avraham. And the Marul Diskin in his Shuvas explains, if the person knows what the translation of the words he's saying, he does not understand the language. He does not understand what it means, Hayom Yom Echad La'ima. But it was explained to him that these strange words you are verbalizing means today is the first day La'ima, then is Yotzi Yadecha V'aseh. There is no kpeda that he needs to understand. But he needs to know what's the count, because that's the mitzvah. So this explains why in these two halachas, Sefiras HaOmer is different than all the other mitzvahs shebediver, Havona on one hand and Kavona on the other. Shemea Ka'ina, maybe the Mogen Avraham is Mesupik. Shemea Ka'ina is a din in all the mitzvahs shebediver. A person could be yotze without using his mouth. He uses his ears. V'ashemea Ka'ina b'kol mokim. But maybe Sefiras HaOmer is different, because Sefiras HaOmer you need to actively define and determine which number is today. And that would also explain why, by all the other mitzvahs shebediver, ksiva is not relevant. But maybe by Sefiras HaOmer, ksiva is as good as talking. Because when you put it down in writing, that is a kviyah of mispar hayomi. So that is the way I understand the mitzvah of Sefiras HaOmer. And why Sefiras HaOmer is different than all the other mitzvahs shebediver? Because Sefiras HaOmer is the only mitzvah shebediver that is essentially not avodas ukeil. It is a means to an end. And just like all the other mitzvahs that involve counting is always meaningless. The only inyan of counting is to know what needs to be counted. And why do these days need to be counted? That is already pnimius. Sefer HaChinuch HaMitzvah Shin Vav, Rabbeinu Yerucham in Nesiv Dalet say, we need to count these days to prepare for Kabbalas HaTorah. And these 49 days are days of Achana. To quote the Lashon of the Chinuch, Laharois benafsheinu es hachifetz hagodol sheyesh lanu el hayoyim hazeh ke'eved yish'af tzeil. And the Eved counts the days. Mosa yagia hayoyim hanichsav sheyetzoi boi lacherus. We count the days. Mosa yagia hayoyim hanichsav sheyakonos boi la'avdus. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu took us out of Mitzrayim not to be free men. Yes, to be freed from the yoke of Paroi, but not to be free men. Ki li b'nei Yisrael avodim, avodayim, asher hoitzeisi oisam me'eretz Mitzrayim. So these 49 days are days that are dedicated to Achona L'Kabbalas HaTorah. What does 49 indicate? It's very well known. Rabbi Sol Salanta, quoted by all his Talmidim. Rabbi Lapian quotes it in Lev Eliyahu. 49 days of Sefira coincide with Memches Dvorim Shatorah Nikneis Bohem. And whenever I share this thought, I say, why couldn't Chazal say Hatorah Nikneis B'Mem Tes Dvorim? my drasha would be just undeniably beautiful. These two numbers are exactly the same. Mem tes kinyon Torah, mem tes yemei asvira. And I could easily suggest one more thing to add on to the list of mem ches dvorim. But that's not the way we learn Chazal. If Chazal say a Torah niknes b'mem ches dvorim, aleim ein lahisif u'mehem ein ligroya. Shchina medeberes metorich groinom. And if it's mem ches, you cannot achieve Torah with mem zayin, and you don't need mem tes. To quote the first Mishnah, Megillah, everybody remembers the Mishnah? Megillah in the case of Yud Aleph, Yud Beis, Yud Gimel, Yud Aleph, Tezvav. And then the Mishnah says, Loi poches v'lo yoisa. Torah niknas b'mem chesvorim, Loi poches v'lo yoisa. But the Yebsor Salanta didn't want to be mevater on this thought. The numbers are too close. They must be connected. So Rav Yebsor Salanta said, and he demanded from his Talmidim, each and every day of Yemei Esvir, you need to work on one of the Kinyon Torah. What do we do with the spare day? That's for Chazorah. Doesn't seem likely. Mem tes Yemei Esvir are min Torah. Mem chesvorim shetorah neknes is a brayse. Chazorah is a minig of yeshivas. It's not min Torah, it's not derabon, it's not a halacha, it's not found in Chazal. I wish it would be a minig of yeshivas. It's not, but it should be. But if you need to do Chazorah on Mem Ches Kinyon Torah, one day would never be enough. Libi Yoimali. Shalu Anshe Alexandria Shel Mitzrayim et Rabbi Shua ben Chananya. Ma Yasa Odam v'Yechkam. And that's a Gemara Nidad Afayinu mit Weiss. Om Elohem Yarbe b'Yeshiva v'Yamayet b'Schoira. What kind of a question are you asking? Learn a lot, waste as little time as you can, and you're going to be a big Talmid Chochem. Yarbe b'Yeshiva v'Yamayet b'Schoira Omru Loi Harba Osuken v'Lo Yolsa b'Yodom. Om Elohem Yevakesh Memi Sha'chochme Sheloi. And the Gemara says, Ha beloha lo kaimi. Lo ukmeger siyata d'shmaya. You need siyata d'shmaya. And to have siyata d'shmaya, you need to daven. So without learning Basmoda, you're never going to make it. But the Bishur ben Chanai says, without filler, you're never going to make it. There's a Sefer Baruch HaOmer, one of the Rishonim. Only those that learn Hilchas Stam are familiar with the Sefer because it's on Hilchas Stam. All the poskim quote him in Simon Lamed Beis and Orach Chaim and elsewhere. Rabbi Yeruchim, in his Sichos, quotes the Hagdoma of Baruch HaOmer. Strange name for a Sefer. I'm not aware of any Sefer that's called Yishtabach Shimcha, or Hoidul Hashem, or why did the Mechaber name the Sefer Baruch HaOmer? He was orphaned as a young boy, Ma'av u'me'em, and he didn't have who to teach him Torah. He had a beautiful voice, and one of the only things he knew was the Baracha of Baruch HaOmer. It's at the beginning of the Siddur, the beginning of Sukkot Dezim. And he used to open during Kodesh and sing and cry and say Baruch HaOmer, davening to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He should learn Torah and have Tzlacha and Torah. And his tefillas were answered. And ultimately he grew to be one of the Rishonim, and that is why he named the Sefer Baruch HaOmer. That is the Zgula of Tefillah. You need to daven to have Siyata D'Shmaya. There's an amazing levush in Siman Reish Tzadik Tet. The Beis Yosef argues that in the Nusach of Birchas Adas Mitzvah Shabbos there's a mistake. And you don't need to say Ato Choinen La'odam Das and once again Ato Choinan Tono. Ato Choinan Tono should replace Ato Choinen La'odam Das. The Levush says no. Ato Choinen La'odam Das or Melamed Le'enosh Bino is thanking HaKadosh Baruch Hu for the human mind. the seichel ha'enushi that HaKadosh Baruch Hu bestowed on every human being, Jew and non-Jew. Umelamed le'enosh bino, kol b'nei enosh. Motzoi Shabbos, when we need to be mavdel bein kodesh l'choil, that is not enough. There's a separate bria, seichel Hatorah, which HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave to Am Hatorah. And it is only with this darga of seichel that we could be mavdel bein kodesh l'choil, bein sheishes yemei hamasa l'Shabbos kodesh, bein Yisrael ha'amim, and therefore there's no duplicity in this brocha. Like every other tefillah b'yamois hachoil, Mitzvot Shabbos is a special brocha on seichel HaTorah. So Torah is unlike any other intellectual endeavor. You could be bright, you could be smart. Yevakesh memi shachoch mishaloi, be'uk megeres siyata d'shmaya. And in my feeling, that's the spare day. So memches yemei svira, we work. And Sefiras is like a ladder. Sulam utzavartza v'roisha magia shamayim. Ragle asulam admas Mitzrayim. The top of the ladder reaches to the top of Har Sinai. And every day we climb another rung of this ladder. And it's 2 feet between one rung and the other. It's a real effort. One rung after the other. And the person is almost at the top. He lifts his eyes and he's horrified. The top rung is missing. He cannot go any higher. He looks down and he's even more horrified. It's dangerous to try to go down that ladder. What should I do now? It was such an effort. I worked so hard. I'm so close. But I cannot proceed. So he starts screaming, is anybody out there? Does anybody hear my voice? Could they give me a hand? Could they give me some rope? Could you help me up? We're so close, and we still feel so far away. And we tried, we worked, but we're not there. And we cry out to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Rabbeinu Shalom, we've made such an effort. Give us a helping hand. And then we have Siyata Dishmaya. That's the spare day. That is Yom Tes. So Choshev Yungarite, I don't mean to say that you start davening Erev Shavuos. It's going to be a busy day and it's a bit too late. This is about symbolism. 48 days for Kinyon Torah, and the spare day teaches us. It teaches us what Rabbi Shua Machananya taught Anshe Alexandria Shel Messiah. Work hard, but that is not enough. Ma yasodam v'yacham. Yarbe b'yeshiva v'yamayit b'schoira. Harbe osu ken v'lo yolsa b'yodam. Yevakesh memi shachach mishaloi. And those tefillas are most precious to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gets 1 million tefillas every day. Most of them ask for money, for power, for kavod, for status, for many good things. Nachas, good health. But those brachas in which a person asks, Rabbi Yisrael, what am I asking for? I just want to learn your Torah. I just want to make you happy. I want to be a Oved Hashem. I want to come closer to you. Those tefillas are most likely to be answered. Those tefillas have priority up there by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, by the Kisei HaKohen. Yevakesh memi shachach mishaloi, yirotzen shechalkenu imohim. Whenever I visit a community, it is always a schus for me to speak to the Kollel, because the Kollel is the life and the spirit of every Yiddish community. I just was involved in opening up a Kollel in Santiago, Chile. They didn't have a Kollel up to now. And now they have 5 younger light. And they visited me last week, and they say, this Bismedish is active for decades. But never did we have 40 balabatim coming every morning to shul and learning with chavrusas, and it's become a mokum Torah. That's the koyach of the Kollel. The Kollel is the neshama of every Jewish community. And I remember when Agor and Rav Graydon discussed with me about opening this Kollel and the efforts that it took to open the Kollel here in this chus of the Pratzel. For me, it's a tremendous chus to address, to speak to the younger light of the Kollel and to the many balabatim that are here, that are all b'nei Torah. So we should all be zoicha. B'chag Shavuos habo aleinu l'toiva, to be makabel all Torah and all malchus shemayim ba'avo. Our tefillah should be answered, and we should be zoicha b'korav. After a difficult 2.5 years of war and malchama, we should be zoicha Kodesh Baruch Hu. V'nosati sholem ba'oreis, u'shchavtem ve'ein machred. We should be able to learn Torah b'shalva, b'nachas, u'b'simcha, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu should send us Mashiach Tzidkenu, like every day after Sefiras we say, Horachamonu, Yachzalonu, Avodas Beis HaMikdash L'Mkoimo, B'mehero v'yomeinu, Amen Yisrael.